I can't trust you if you're playing both sides, Sylas murmured, softening his tone, his vulnerability breaking through the barrier of anger. Trust, Gwendolyn echoed, almost breathless. It's a luxury right now. As Sylas leaned in, their proximity ignited an unquenchable fire, foreboding yet tender. His breath tangled with hers, warm and inviting, and for a fleeting moment they both chose to surrender to the inevitable. Hearts drummed in unison, each second stretched, brimming with unspoken words and fear-sculpted hopes. The clamor of the world faded into poignant silence, their lips moving closer until a sharp sound interrupted, echoing from outside, a reminder of the chaos lurking ever closer. They both jolted back, grounding themselves in the reality of their fractured trust, the hot breath of unfulfilled desire lingering in the space between them. "What do we do now?" Gwendolyn whispered, breaking the weighty silence, her voice tinged with uncertainty, yet threaded with resolution. A moment stretched, heavier than the darkening sky, as Sylas grappled with his own tumultuous thoughts, shrouded in the stark reality of betrayal. "We survive," he finally said, the fire in his eyes igniting once more. "But this time, we need each other, completely." And in that flicker of common purpose, beneath the burden of uncertainty, something shifted, a dawning truce in the midst of a tempest. Scene 33, torn between loyalties. The dim light filtered through cracked windows, casting geometric shadows on the stone walls. Outside, the rain poured in a relentless cascade, each drop a tempo to the unsettled hearts within. Gwendolyn stood at the edge of the makeshift shelter, peering out into the murky abyss where the line between life and death blurred. "Do you think it's ever going to stop?" Sylas asked, leaning casually against a pillar, his fingers brushing against his stubbled chin. The smirk on his lips was a semblance of ease, yet his eyes reflected the turmoil beneath the surface. Gwendolyn half turned, her brow furrowed. The rain? Or this madness? She gestured toward the blood-stained arena, where faint echoes of prior struggles lingered in the air like ghosts. "Both, I suppose." He stepped closer, the warmth of his presence sending a charge through the damp air. "But what's madness without a little passion?" Her heartbeat quickened, but it wasn't just the cooperation against the turmoil outside that set it ablaze. "You know, it's not just about survival for me." She took a deliberate breath, steadying her racing thoughts. "Every decision, every alliance affects my family," she said, her voice a hushed tone, a whisper of guilt threading through her words. Sylas tilted his head, studying her. "Your family? Or the family you want to leave behind? There's a difference." A memory stirred within her, her brother's laughter, the family dinners now shadows in her mind. "I can't just walk away from them, Sylas. They are my blood, and this, our fight, it's complicated. You think I don't feel the weight of my own choices?" He stepped closer, the very air between them sparking with unspoken tension. "You think I didn't owe something to the past I carry?" Gwendolyn shivered, but it was not from the chill in the air. "What do you need to prove that you're more than what you were?" He took a step back, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "Maybe we're all just trying to figure out who we can be when the world's on fire. But do we cling to what we know, or reach for something better?" The rain drummed violently against the roof, yet within the room, the atmosphere shifted, gathering heat rather than cold. It was a curious contrast, lifting the corners of Gwendolyn's mouth despite herself. "Better?" she echoed, her expression softening. "It's what we make of the chaos." His voice was low, vibrating with fervor and understanding, and he stepped even closer. The world outside faded, their unguarded moment cocooned in an electric silence, a pause pregnant with possibility. Gwendolyn's heartbeat echoed in her ears. "Do you think we're even capable of it?" "Capable?" He inched his way forward, drawing nearer still. His presence enveloped her, the scent of him, earthy with a hint of something citrusy, saturated her senses. "More than you know." And then the distance shattered, and as if pulled by an unseen force, their lips collided, gentle yet demanding. It was an exploration of everything unsaid, of burdens unshared, of the tender weight of conflict. Their lips moved in reaction to the storm outside, as though they were an island of sanity amid the rising tides of chaos. Yet the kiss broke, their foreheads leaning against one another, breaths mingling in a sweet vulnerability. "What are we doing?" she whispered, the question hanging between them, as thick as the storm clouds over their heads. "We're deciding what tomorrow looks like." Sylas murmured, eyes steady on hers. The resolve in his gaze clashed with the fear in hers, and though they stood on the precipice of chaos, something deeper had rooted them, an understanding clothed in desire. Tomorrow, she sighed, seeing the mosaic of their future shifting like the rain, now a tempest, and wondering if they could forge a path between loyalty and yearning. What if? But before she could finish, a loud crash echoed from outside, the unsettling thrum of their reality flooding back in. They pulled apart, the moment of intimacy fracturing as the harsh world insisted on its unrelenting presence. "What was that?" Gwendolyn asked, her voice rising with the frenetic energy of impending danger. "I don't know," Sylas replied, eyes narrowing, a hint of something darker creeping into his expression. "But we need to find out." As they stepped into the chaos, the warmth of their earlier connection clung to them, a flicker of hope in the looming darkness, binding their loyalties and desires in a way neither fully understood. Scene 34. Clarity through chaos. The air in the arena crackled, thick with tension and the unmistakable scent of damp earth, an ironic reminder of the raw, elemental nature of their surroundings. Shadows twisted and turned in the dimming light, creating a phantom dance of danger that gripped Gwendolyn's heart with both dread and determination. She crouched behind a jagged outcrop, the temperature steadily dropping as twilight seeped into the creases of the massive stone walls that imprisoned them. Her breath formed little clouds in the chill as she leaned into the cacophony of chaos around her. A short distance away, Sylas adjusted the collar of his thrown-together jacket, the fabric obscuring a wealth of memories gnawing at him like a starving animal. He caught her eye for a fleeting moment, a flicker that ignited a deeper bond forged in the fires of survival. "You know," he started, his voice almost lost in the rustling wind, "the only thing we can count on in here is unpredictable alliances. It's like herding cats." Gwendolyn smirked despite the fear constricting her chest. "Or trusting them to keep their claws retractable. They were cautious creatures, both of them, but in this world, caution was luxury reserved for the safe." From the shadows emerged Nathaniel, his brow furrowed and eyes fierce. "Enemies are gathering. We need a plan. Or we might end up just like last week's volunteers." He gestured dismissively, as if brushing aside the memory of blood spilled in foolishness. As the others circulated into view one by one, Celia with a perpetual smirk on her face, and Marcus, brooding and silent, they formed a ragged circle, uncertain yet strong in their shared resolve. The unity felt electric, a counterbalance to the chaos around them. "Plan?" Marcus scoffed. "How do we plan when nothing is in our hands but our short-lived lives?" "You make it sound so grim, Marcus," Celia chirped, her eyes sparkling despite the grim reality. "We're not dead yet. Besides, chaos can be a decision-maker." Nathaniel shot her a look. "Informal yet witty? Great strategy. Remind me to quote that when we're gasping for air." Redirection flared, and Sylvia found herself retreating from the looming shadows. She cast her eyes on Sylas, who seemed to effortlessly radiate confidence, a soothing presence amidst the mental storm surrounding them. As panic fluttered in her chest, she knew a shift had begun, and it came rushing toward her in gentle, unexpected waves, an undeniable connection laced with an urgency that shifted the air. "Why did we trust him?" Gwendolyn's voice sliced through the convivial tone of their banter. She couldn't shake the feeling that the light radiating from Sylas was a beacon for her uncertainty. She stepped nearer to him, her gaze steady. "You once asked what it means to survive this. If we want to save anyone, we have to start from within." Sylas nodded thoughtfully, his expression darkening. "Then we become the orchestrators, not the managed." His gaze softened as he looked at her, a mix of admiration and vulnerability glinting in his eyes. The collective tension seemed to recede, replaced by something deeper and more comforting, a cocoon against the outside world. Gwendolyn dared to close the distance, their embers of unspoken words spinning a web around them. "Sometimes," she paused, the weight pressing against her throat, "sometimes the chaos reveals clarity." It was unclear to both of them if she meant the turmoil of their environment or the wild yearning in her heart. Seconds stretched as they remained rooted there, nothing surrounding them but darkness and the whispers of their truths. In that space, Sylas's hand brushed against hers, tentative, electric. The warmth surged through her like wildfire, burning away the haze of doubt. And suddenly, with the closeness of their bodies, the world blurred. "Gwen," he murmured, searching for the right words. All around them, the arena roared, a deafening reminder of what lay ahead. Yet all she could concentrate on was the heat of his breath against her cheek and the unguarded vulnerability flickering in his expression. With a boldness she hadn't known she possessed, Gwendolyn reached out, capturing the moment. Their lips barely brushed together, hesitant and sweet, igniting an intensity that bore no comparisons. A brief interlude amidst the chaos, a clandestine act against the inevitability they faced. They pulled back, breathless, hearts drumming like war drums in the night. For a fleeting moment they existed beyond the chaos, illuminated by shared tenderness as reality crept back in. Gwendolyn whispered, "We hold the power to change everything." Scene 35. Choices of the heart. Gwendolyn stood at the edge of the grimy rooftop, wind whipping through her hair, her heart pounding not just from the cold, but from the weight of what lay ahead. The dim cityscape stretched out below her, a tapestry of shadows and flickering lights, each telling a story of survival. If only she could weave her past into this new reality like the buildings cobbled together down the street. The thought brought a clenched jaw and a lingering glance at Sylas, who stood nearby, his figure etched against the dying light. Gwendolyn could see that the corners of his mouth were drawn tight, his eyes flashing with concern and unvoiced questions. She could almost taste the unsaid words hanging in the air, thick and taut, each one a choice waiting to be made. "Gwen, we can't keep wading through this murk without a plan," he said, his voice steady, but the tension beneath it was palpable. She turned sharply, and the air between them crackled with unresolved feelings. He took a step closer, the weight of their situation pressing them together in a way that felt impossible, yet magnetic. "Do you even know what I'm up against?" she whispered, glancing back at the others who were debating strategy in hushed tones, unaware of the storm brewing between her and Sylas. An uninvited hit of guilt washed over her. Their shared glances betrayed more than just friendship. It was an understanding that carved deeper into her heart. "Do you think any of us do?" Sylas replied, his brow furrowing as he brushed a hand through his hair, causing a few strands to rebel against the wind. "You're not just fighting for your past, you're also fighting for our future, for all of us." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, surprising even herself. "You say that as if I have a choice, Sylas. Loyalty is a double-edged sword, and mine is starting to feel like it's going to cut me wide open." His eyes flickered with something anger, frustration, or perhaps understanding grimaced along his features. He moved closer until the space between them felt like a cocoon, binding their fates even tighter. "And what of my heart? You think I'm not feeling the weight of all this? I know what it costs, but you have to choose, Gwendolyn, your past or us." The words hung heavy like dark clouds before a storm. "You make it sound so simple," she shot back, feeling the need to deflect as much as confront. "There are lives at stake, and I have obligations." Gwendolyn's voice cracked, and the hint of vulnerability sent a shiver down her spine. Sylas inhaled sharply, his expression softening as he reached for her hand. The warmth of his touch enveloped her fingers, chasing away the chill of uncertainty. A short distance away, Leo, another participant in the game, paced a circle with Grace, his partner. "We really need to focus on timing the next moves," he urged, glancing towards the couple. Yet their conversation seemed to cut through the noise of impending plans. "This isn't just about winning anymore. This is survival. We need every moment." "Timing? You think that's what matters?" Grace retorted with a raised eyebrow, determination nose-diving into the landscape of shifting allegiances. "What about our hearts, Leo? We could lose that as easily as this game." "Gwen?" Sylas interrupted, drawing her back from the brink of indecision. A glimmer of hope sparked in his gaze. "You can be both. You can fulfill your obligations and still stand with me. Don't turn away from what feels right." Her heart raced with the fusion of longing and fear. And what if what feels right leads us to ruin? She stepped back, breaking the connection of their hands, the loss echoing in her chest like thunder. "As if we're not already in ruin," he shot back, the heat of their argument mingling with the cool evening air, creating a whirlwind between them. He hesitated and searched her face. "This isn't just about duty. It's what you want, Gwen. What do you truly want?" His question hung in the air, entwined with their shared breaths, sending her thoughts into a wild spiral. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, and through the cacophony of shouts and the rush of wind, she felt the pull of both choices, echoing in her heart, battling for dominance. The voices of her comrades blurred as she focused not on the chaos but on Sylas, the man who opened a door to a future she had fought to close. "What if," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, almost lost in the wind. "What if I choose you?" It was a decision fraught with risk, vulnerability, and a fragile bond that could shatter. But that single thought, like a red thread, tied her to Sylas in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. "Then we forge a new path together," he said, breathless. And in that moment, amongst the chaos of their world, they found a flicker of hope, nestled between choices and hearts. Scene 36. Unraveling threads. The dim, flickering lights above cast long shadows across the rusted metal table where Sylas and Gwendolyn leaned in, poring over a map that looked as though it had been ripped from the pages of a long-forgotten novel. The air was thick with the mingled scents of damp stone, cold steel, and the faint whiff of sweat, a reminder of their perpetual confinement. Around them, the rest of their motley crew, an odd blend of bravado and desperation, chatted quietly, calculating the best course of action. Sylas traced a path on the map with his finger. "If we push through the east corridor, we can reach the supply cache before they realize we're onto them," he suggested, his voice steady yet charged with tension. He met Gwendolyn's gaze, the corners of his mouth twitching as if to lighten the heft of their predicament. Gwendolyn frowned, her brow furrowing. "And what if they're already aware? We can't afford to get pinched between two factions." Her tone was pragmatic, laced with a hint of the fatigue that had started to weigh down her usually fierce spirit. From across the table, Marcus interjected, leaning back as though to make a point without saying much. "You two are overlooking the point as usual. It's not just about what we want, it's what they expect us to do." He smirked, flipping a small knife between his fingers. "And we all know what happens when we follow the rules. They rig the game." The group's bonds, once seemingly indestructible, were taut with the tension of hidden agendas and unspoken doubts. Lena and Jace stood behind Gwendolyn, exchanging furtive glances that spoke of a shared conspiracy. They had their own plan, veering away from the safety of the group, and as Jace leaned in closer, his whispers barely reached Gwendolyn's ears. "We could destabilize their ranks, break them from within." Gwendolyn stiffened, turning to place a hand on Jace's arm, her voice low but fierce. "And expose ourselves to the fallout? We can't just take reckless risks." Lena chimed in, her voice honeyed with feigned innocence. "Or maybe we can take those risks, Gwendolyn. Maybe some chaos is exactly what we need to turn this around." As the friction among the group spiraled, a moment of unexpected vulnerability struck Sylas. Standing, he pushed the map aside, frustration spilling over. "Do you understand the stakes here? We're talking about survival, not just some game of chess. Sometimes you need to sacrifice pieces for the bigger picture." His voice cracked, revealing a hint of the turmoil he usually kept well concealed. Gwendolyn, shaken, softened at his admission. "Then what's the bigger picture, Sylas? Because right now I can't see it." Her eyes searched his, a mix of challenge and plea, enticing him to reveal more. The intensity lingered between them until it was disrupted by Marcus, who snapped his knife shut, breaking the tension. "Enough philosophical waxing. How about we just get to the heart of it? If we're going to push through, we need to be united. You have to trust that no one is throwing anyone under the bus, at least not yet." His mockery fell flat, eyes darting around the room, gauging reactions. As if to reinforce the atmosphere of unity, Sylas stepped closer to Gwendolyn, their arms brushing momentarily. Her heartbeat quickened, fueled by a mingling of shared purpose and unexpressed feelings. "We'll find a way," he whispered, leaning in so only she could hear. It was a promise wrapped in uncertainty, the kind of connection forged in shared chaos. Jace broke in, a hint of sarcasm lining his smile. "Well, aren't we all just a bunch of lovebirds today? Let's focus on survival before we start making Hallmark cards." They shared a collective chuckle, an attempt to drown the wave of doubt crashing upon them. But as the laughter faded into the silence of the room, the reality of their situation sat heavy across their shoulders. Gwendolyn exhaled slowly, glancing at the others. We're not just surviving. We need to strategize. If we're going to sabotage our enemies, we must move as one." The words settled, tension lifting slightly but still thick in the air. As she looked at Sylas, that unacknowledged flicker of attraction and loyalty glimmered between them, waiting to be acknowledged. The path ahead was uncertain, yet somehow, together, they felt an odd comfort in knowing they were not alone. "Together, then," Sylas said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Together," she affirmed, the vow resonating deeper than mere survival, an anchor in the chaos surrounding their worlds. Scene 37. Moments of Reckoning. The dim light flickered overhead, casting wavering shadows over the concrete floor. Dust motes danced in the beams, swirling through the air like lost dreams. Sylas leaned against the cold, crumbling wall, his expression a tight knot of turmoil. "Do we have a choice, Gwendolyn?" he asked, his voice low, each word soaked in gravity. The question hung in the air, heavy and fraught with uncertainty. Gwendolyn stood across from him, a flicker of vulnerability coursing through her steady gaze. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, revealing the slight quiver in her lip that betrayed her otherwise resolute demeanor. "Sometimes it feels like all we do is survive," she said, her voice strained with the struggle of maintaining her composure. "Maybe we need to risk everything to truly live." In the corner, Clara, one of the younger participants in the deadly game, watched them intently, her wide eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and fear. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I don't want to die here." The words rang out sharp, a stark reminder of the stakes they all faced. Sylas turned, meeting Clara's frightened gaze. "None of us do," he assured, his tone softening, "but sacrifices might be necessary." The tension in the room spiraled when he glanced back at Gwendolyn, her resolute facade cracking. "I can't lose you, Gwendolyn. Not like this." "Don't say that," she asserted, her voice rising slightly. "What if saving you means sacrificing others? What then?" Her eyes were fierce, challenging the very core of his reasoning. The dispute hung like a thundercloud, pregnant with emotion. "What other choice do we have?" Sylas retorted, frustration laced in his words. "People are depending on us. You know those in our group might turn on us if they think we're no longer useful." A knock on the door startled everyone, interrupting their fraught conversation. Margot, the ever-practical strategist of their motley crew, pushed through the entrance with a clipboard in hand, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. "We need to move, like yesterday," she declared, scanning the room. "The Coalition's patrols are getting more frequent. We have to decide on a plan if we want a shot at survival. All we have are choices that threaten everything we stand for." Gwendolyn sighed, folding her arms tightly across her chest as she wrestled with the weight of their predicament. Before Sylas could respond, the door creaked open again, revealing Lyle, a tall figure whose swagger concealed his desperation. "Can you two save the philosophical debates for later? We're not all here to hear your exquisite arguments on morality," he interrupted, his voice a roll of thunder designed to weaken their resolve. Gwendolyn narrowed her eyes at him. "Maybe, if we don't discuss these things, we'll walk blindly to our doom." "Blindness might be the best approach, then," Lyle shot back, resisting the urge to glance away from her fiery stare. "Actions speak louder than words." Just then, from the shadows of the room, Rhea snorted, flicking a pebble off her shoe. "Can you believe this?" she chimed in, a humor lacing her tone despite the tension. "Philosophy and poetry amidst this horror show. Are we writing a novel here, or escaping with our lives?" Her smile broke the air like a dull knife, cutting through the unease. The small levity didn't last long, as Sylas and Gwendolyn's gazes locked again, both of them filled with unspoken truths. "If we compromise now, we might not get another chance," Sylas said, his heart racing as he considered sacrificing the deal that could ensure Gwendolyn's safety. "If we manipulate the Coalition's plans." Before he could finish, Clara interjected, panic edging her voice. "You can't risk her." Her expression twisted with concern, and Sylas's heart sank, torn between loyalty to Gwendolyn and the fear of risking all their lives. "I can't lose anyone else," Gwendolyn said softly, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The vulnerability now palpable, she searched his gaze and whispered, "Please, believe that we can find another way." In that heartbeat, Sylas felt the world around them dissolve. He leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers. "Gwen," he murmured, their foreheads nearly touching, "what if this is our only path?" The very air shifted as her eyes softened, mingling hope with despair. Then we walk together? Or not at all? An overwhelming silence enveloped them, each heartbeat echoing the gravity of their choices. Sylas's chest tightened. The choice ahead contained shadows darker than any nightmare, yet the flicker of Gwendolyn's courage burned bright. In that moment, their fates entwined irreversibly, a reflection of their shared resolve, challenging the storm brewing outside the walls they called home. Scene 38. The Freedom Gambit. Gwendolyn glanced at the cold gray walls of the abandoned warehouse, the remnants of previous battles echoing in her mind. A chill crept into her bones, not solely from the oppressive atmosphere but from the urgency that stampeded through her thoughts. This place, once a refuge, could potentially become their crucible. As she paced, her fingers brushed the hilt of the knife tucked against the small of her back, reassuring her of its presence. "Do you trust them?" Sylas asked, his voice piercing through the silence as if coaxing it to unravel. Gwendolyn froze, her heart quickening. The question hung in the air, electrifying and heavy. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford," she replied, her voice steady but laced with the edge of doubt. She met his gaze, searching for the certainty she clung to, but all she found was shadow and complexity mirrored in his eyes. "Then let's exploit their arrogance." His expression turned calculating, each word laced with vibrant intensity. "We draw them in and let them think they're in control. They won't anticipate a coup until it's too late." As they strategized, a constellation of thoughts glimmered in their minds, revealing uncharted territories of ambition and desperation. Gwendolyn felt an undeniable pull towards him, igniting something she thought she'd buried beneath responsibilities and the weight of survival. "Why didn't you tell me about your past?" A sudden question slipped from her mouth, raw and unfiltered. As soon as she spoke, she regretted it, the vulnerability exposed. Sylas faltered for a moment, a flicker of discomfort betraying his otherwise composed facade. "Because revealing that darkness doesn't change the light we're fighting for now." Just then, footsteps echoed outside, tugging them back to the present. The tension snapped like a taut string, redirecting their energy towards the potential conflict looming at the warehouse entrance. Meanwhile, across the expanse, Lorenzo and Ivy were deep in an animated discussion. Ivy, wrapped in a patchwork cardigan, paced, her hair flying wildly as she gestured with abandon. "How can they be so blind, Lorenzo? We could be the architects of this revolution if they only let us." Lorenzo leaned against a column, arms crossed, amusement dancing in his eyes. "And what's your plan?" "Hand out cupcakes and suggest we all hug it out. We need a strategy, not a bake sale." "Why not both? You know how sugar can boost morale," she shot back, a teasing glimmer cutting through her frustration. Just as their banter reached a crescendo, the distant sound of shouting pulled their attention. Both turned to see Gwendolyn and Sylas standing silent, eyes fixed intently somewhere beyond. Ivy stepped closer, intrigued. "What's happening?" "Something's coming," Lorenzo muttered, the playfulness drained from his tone. Gwendolyn's voice broke the charged silence, fierce and unwavering. "We need to act fast. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about taking back control." The intensity in her voice ignited a fire within the group. Sylas stepped closer to her, their shoulders brushing, heightening the tension between them. "Let's entice them into a trap. Their hubris will make them reckless if we play it right." Their eyes locked in a moment, suspended in time, brewing an unsaid understanding. Just as Gwendolyn opened her mouth to respond, their connection snapped back to the reality of the approaching danger. "Let's get to work," she said, a hint of determination lacing her voice. The group scurried into action, their laughter and banter mingling with the adrenaline of the moment. Lorenzo turned to Ivy and quipped, "So much for cupcakes, huh?" Ivy smirked, rolling her eyes. "Maybe we can reserve those for the victory party." As Gwendolyn and Sylas set plans in motion with fervor, her pulse raced, a blend of excitement and trepidation igniting between them. Each strategic move drew them closer, not just in purpose, but in something deeper, a magnetic pull neither fully understood. "Gwen," Sylas whispered just before they diverged to implement their plan, the moment stretching between them, dripping with promise. "Yeah?" she breathed, heart pounding. Just know, no matter what happens, I'm with you." "Good," she replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips, feeling an anchor in the storm. They stepped towards their shared destiny, ready to face not just the shadows of their past, but the chaos of their uncertain future, with a fragile trust blossoming beneath the surface. Scene 39. A chance encounter. The dim, flickering lights of the warehouse cast an erratic glow, each pulse echoing the chaos that had unfolded during the latest challenge. The air hung thick with smoke and tension, heavily scented with uncertainty like an impending storm. Sylas Archer leaned against a steel support beam, the cool metal grounding him amidst the whirling emotions. He could hear echoes of laughter and cries of exasperation in the distance, participants declaring their triumphs or failures, yet he remained enveloped in a silence that felt undeniably charged. Just beside him, Gwendolyn Frost paced swiftly, her thoughts racing like the wind whipping through a tempest. Her brow furrowed with concentration, eyes piercing with a fierce intensity that made it hard to look away. "Sylas," she said, the weight of her voice wrapping around them both, "we can't keep pretending this isn't tearing us apart." He let a small huff escape, half a laugh, half a groan. "This place feels less like survival and more like a never-ending circus. Sometimes I think I might just start juggling knives." The corners of her mouth twitched, fighting against the gravity of the situation. "Then I'd have to stay close to make sure you don't drop one on your foot." A rush of warmth filled the space between them, lightening the tension, at least for a heartbeat. But this insane game had a way of crashing even the lightest moments. The distant sound of a group of participants celebrating their recent escape from elimination caught Gwendolyn's attention. She shifted, her expression darkening. "Every time we think we're one step ahead, they throw another obstacle in our way." Sylas pushed away from the beam, forcing himself to face her fully. "And yet, you keep standing. You keep strategizing. Why? Isn't it exhausting?" She crossed her arms defensively, but her eyes softened. "Because if we stop fighting, we're already dead." Each word carried the weight of her resolve, echoing in the damp atmosphere. Several feet away, Charlene and Jax debated fiercely about who had won the last challenge. The argument escalated into playful banter, swirling around them like a light-hearted mist. "Honestly, Jax, you couldn't outrun a snail," Charlene teased, her laughter bubbling through the air. "Watch out with that verbal assault. I might pull out my secret weapon, charisma." Jax replied, striking a mock heroic pose. Meanwhile, Sylas's heart raced next to Gwendolyn, thumping like the rain pounding against the steel roof. If only they could bask in that laughter and joviality. He struggled to shield her from the storm brewing within. "You know all this talk about survival?" Sylas said, his eyes locked onto hers. "It's harder when you're alone. I've always been more comfortable with the chaos." "And yet," she replied, tilting her head slightly, "you're proving to be a lot more than just a charming jester." He took a step closer, the space between them feeling electric. Sylas searched her eyes for that flicker of understanding that had bound them since the beginning of their entrapment. "If this ends badly, would you ever forgive yourself? Or would you—" A crash echoed from the opposite side of the warehouse. A shelving unit toppled over, scattering various objects and plunging the atmosphere back into disarray. The playful debate was disrupted and the air crackled with renewed urgency. Laughter turned into shouts of concern from nearby participants who abruptly shifted into action. Jax quickly ran to help Charlene, while others began to scout the perimeter for any potential threats. "Focus," Gwendolyn snapped, her tone momentarily shifting as she returned to leader mode, assessing the scene. "We can't get distracted. We need to regroup and—" Sylas stepped forward, capturing her attention once more. "And if we don't survive this?" His voice softened again, barely rising above the ruckus. "What do we have left?" For a moment, Gwendolyn was silent, the chaos swirling around them a stark contrast to the mutual understanding that seemed to bind their souls in that fragile instant. "Isn't that why we keep fighting?" she finally whispered, her gaze unwavering, glistening with unshed emotion. "Maybe," he replied, each word flowing between them like an unbreakable thread. "But I don't want to fight alone." As they stood there surrounded by the frantic noise of their fellow contestants, the world outside receded, and in that fleeting pause, they both felt the weight of unspoken promises hanging in the air, their fate entwined. Scene 40. Fleeting Connections. In the dimly lit room of their temporary refuge, a broken bulb swung gently from the ceiling, casting long shadows as the outside world pulsed with the urgency of impending chaos. The air held a mixture of stale metal from the old furnace and the faint sweetness of nearby wildflowers. They had been stripped from their roots earlier, only to serve as a reminder of what once thrived here. Sylas seated himself at the small, battered table, fingers tracing the splintered edge, feeling the roughness under his touch as if grounding him in the moment. Gwendolyn stood near the cracked window, peering outside with narrowed eyes, watching the distant figures, other players, desperate and dangerous, circling like wolves. "Any word from the others?" Sylas asked, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of strain. Gwendolyn turned abruptly, her usual calm replaced with an intensity that nearly crackled in the air. "Do you think they'll care if we're okay? They're consumed by their own survival." There was silence, thick and palpable. Sylas leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, a gesture both defensive and protective. "You sound bitter," he said, but the concern slipped through his bravado. She scoffed, shaking her head. "You think I should believe they'll risk themselves for us? We're all pawns here, Sylas. Even if I sacrifice for you, would you risk that trust?" He stood, just an inch closer, as the question hung between them, taut yet delicate. Gwendolyn's gaze flickered. It was a fleeting crack in her armor. "Trust is just a word, isn't it? It doesn't mean anything in this game." The door swung open, and the rest of their ragtag group filtered in, but the tension between Sylas and Gwendolyn pulsed louder than their chatter. At the back, Theo, short and round-faced, tossed a quick grin their way, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "You two look like you're about to escalate a disagreement," he quipped, plopping down in a chair heavily. "Or resolve a profound philosophical crisis," Julian added with a smirk, nudging Theo with an elbow. "Don't mind us while we ponder the meaning of life over some fruit. It might be our last meal, after all. Right, Theo?" Julian continued, gesturing dramatically with a plastic banana they had scavenged, as laughter broke out among the group. For a moment, the noise enveloped Sylas and Gwendolyn, bringing them out of their fragile standoff. But the lightness dissipated quickly, as Gwendolyn's gaze lingered on Sylas. "Doesn't matter how hard we try to convince others that we're all on this together," she whispered, the world around them fading as intimacy eclipsed the noise of the ongoing struggle. "I'm not like them," Sylas replied, voice low, only for her ears. "I'll sacrifice everything to get out of this alive with you. You make it worth fighting for." Her breath caught, and Gwendolyn swallowed tightly. The vulnerability rose between them, a raw and tender reality amidst the screeching of the world outside. "You don't know what you'd be sacrificing, Sylas. Not everyone gets a choice. Not everyone's been given a shot at redemption." The moment trembled in the air, thick as storm clouds. In his eyes, she caught the remnants of a haunted past intermingling with hope, a glimmer as fleeting as a heartbeat. Maybe redemption isn't about a past we can't control. Maybe it's about who you choose to save next. Quiet hugs of silence wrapped around them, and just then they felt the weight of uncertainty balancing precariously on the brink of intimacy. "Okay, enough of this," Theo proclaimed, breaking through the current of their private exchange with a wave of laughter. "I vote for a bonding ceremony, a dance-off to raise spirits. Who's in?" Julian chimed in. "There's no better way to fortify our resolve than to get silly together. Besides, we need a distraction before someone else tries to kill us." Slowly, Gwendolyn's tension thawed into reluctant amusement, a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of their plight. "Dance-off? Seriously? Come on, it'll lift the gloom," Theo insisted, and as the group erupted into a fuzzy chatter filled with laughter and mock interpretations of their previous encounter, the edges of their world felt just a touch softer. As the noise crescendoed, Sylas and Gwendolyn shared a look over the heads of their friends, both tentatively vulnerable, yet gravitating toward the closeness they fought so hard to deny. "Later?" Sylas quietly asked, a whispered invitation in the chaos. "Definitely later," Gwendolyn replied softly, though her eyes shimmered with the fire of challenges not yet faced. Guided by promise and the faintest hint of laughter, they forged ahead into the uncertain night. Scene 41. Plotting the next move. The heavy curtain of rain smothered the dilapidated building. its rhythmic patter echoing through the hallways where doubts lingered like stale air. Sylas Archer sat against a chipped wall, tracing the wood grain with his fingers as his mind wrestled with the chaos outside. Did he dare trust them? The thrills of the game tightened their grip on his psyche, a knife's edge of betrayal and loyalty. He could still hear Gwendolyn Frost's rallying cries from earlier, filled with fire as she called upon the others to unite against their captors. Nearby, Gwendolyn paced, her brows knit in concentration. The flickering light from a dilapidated bulb caught the streaks of her rain-soaked hair and mirrored the storm brewing within her chest. Why are we just sitting here? We need a plan, and fast. She glanced at Sylas, intensity rolling off her in waves. Plans take time, Gwendolyn, he replied softly, his voice cracking slightly. And we don't have the luxury of being reckless. No, what we can't afford is inaction. She threw her hands up, water droplets cascading off her fingertips like little shards of frustration. Behind her, their ragtag group acquaintances turned companions, gathered in a fractured circle. Emma, still clutching a makeshift map inked on a frayed tarp, interjected. Gwen's right. If we wait too long, those in power will tighten their grip. We need to destabilize them. Her voice, usually soothing, held a tense urgency. What makes us think they won't tear us apart the moment we make a move? Jack, ever the skeptic, crossed his arms defensively. Strength in numbers, huh? That's a laugh. Are you going to help or just keep squabbling? Amped up Tyler, stepping forward, sparks of impatience lighting his expression. What we need is a distraction, something audacious. Marianne, who had been quietly observing, piped up, Distraction, huh? Like setting a few walls on fire? You know they'd come after us? We can't do something so reckless, Gwendolyn cut in, panic flaring in her blue eyes. The tension thickened like fog, weighing down the camaraderie they had frantically tried to build. A sudden crash outside reverberated through the walls, pulling everyone's attention. They exchanged looks of concern, at least it wasn't their door giving way. In the distance, sirens wailed, punctuating the rising dread. Listen, Sylas spoke up, cutting through the chaos like a knife. What if we use their fear against them? Create an illusion that there are reinforcements, that the game is shifting? Gwendolyn's shimmering gaze met his. A pulse of understanding flashed between them, the promise of something greater. That could work, if we can convince them we have allies. She trailed off, the spark of hope igniting, almost too bright in the thickening tension. They nestled deeper into the huddle, voices blending into strategy, each suggestion layered with subtext and desires unspoken. The storm outside clashed with their emotional tempest. Rain splashed against the windows like the heartbeat of their fervor. In the corner, Emma glanced at Sylas, her eyebrows knitting together with concern. You've been quiet. What's your real plan? Sylas leaned back, shifting slightly, discomfort sweeping over him as if the very air around them thickened with accusation. I just want to survive. What about you? Survival isn't enough, she insisted, voice raised slightly, causing Gwendolyn to break into the conversation. Great, then let's fight for something that counts. Gwendolyn's tone crackled, determination igniting in her veins. And let's stop second-guessing each other's intentions. So we're sure of each other? Tyler asked playfully, flashing a brief grin. Just checking, because if I'm taking the fall with you drama queens, I'm going to need a buddy. Their laughter mingled momentarily, a fragile camaraderie redefining the space around them. But Sylas caught Gwendolyn's gaze again, this time charged with a different energy, a pact forming in the heated air. As their companions bickered playfully, the tension shifted, lingering between Sylas and Gwendolyn like an unspoken spell. Together? He asked softly, realization dawning that they weren't just plotting their escape, but intertwining futures in this deadly game. Her breath caught. The storm outside intensified, unleashing a cascade of rain that drummed against the glass like their hearts in that vulnerable moment. Always, Gwendolyn replied, and before they could retreat into the whirlwind of their companions, she stepped closer, brushing her wet hair back. The ambient noise faded, and all that existed was their proximity, a thin veil of heated resolve enveloping them. The kiss that followed was tentative yet ignited with the weight of everything unspoken, a promise sealed beneath the shadows of uncertainty. Just as the storm raged outside, so did their emotions, chaotic yet unified, a dance on the edge of survival. And then there was only them, quiet laughter ringing out from their friends while destiny held its breath. Scene 42. A dance of deception. The air buzzed with a tension so palpable it could be carved from stone. Sylas found himself surrounded by concrete walls marked with the remnants of past struggles, unyielding and cold. The dim industrial lighting flickered occasionally, casting shadows that danced like specters across the grimy floor. In the center of the space, Gwendolyn stood tall, her fiery auburn hair catching the intermittent light. A fierce resolve etched on her face. "Do you really think they'll leave us alone if we play nice?" Sylas's voice sliced through the atmosphere, brimming with an unsettling blend of charm and gravity. He leaned casually against a pillar, but his clenched fists exposed the tension he was holding back. Gwendolyn narrowed her eyes, the slight squint making her appear even more formidable. "No, but playing the part might give us time," she challenged, stepping closer as the space between them felt charged, electric, a fine line strung between trust and betrayal. Around them the other players loomed, tense and shifting like restless animals. Fiona, the fleet-footed spy, exchanged glances with Malik and Toyin, who were whispering furtively, their heads huddled together like conspirators. They were mapping their strategy, an unspoken alliance forming in the shadows of the arena. "Hope you've got a plan," Malik murmured, glancing furtively toward Sylas and Gwendolyn, his brow furrowed. "Plans sink faster than hope," Fiona replied curtly, her bright eyes darting around. "It's every player for themselves in here." As Sylas turned his attention back to Gwendolyn, he noted the tension in her posture, a protest against the vulnerability creeping into her stance. Her eyes danced, searching for a hint of sincerity beyond the masks they wore. "To survive this mess, we have to think of them as pieces on a board. Some can't be trusted," Sylas proposed, stepping forward, closing the distance, drawn in by her fierce spirit. "Then what are you offering, Sylas? A sacrifice? Are you willing to go first?" She shot back, catching his gaze directly, her voice sharp yet laced with an allure he found irresistible. The whir of the cooling system interrupted them, filling the space with an artificial chill. The walls seemed to cave in around them, their breath mingling, a heated exchange on the brink of igniting. "I'm offering a chance to outsmart them, to control the game instead of being its pawns," he responded, a playful smirk creeping onto his lips, an expression that, for a heartbeat, softened their rigid competition into something profoundly intimate. Behind them, Fiona and Malik's whispers fell silent as they exchanged furtive glances. The desire for survival, mingling with jealousy, painted their faces in shifting hues of disdain. "I don't trust you," Gwendolyn maintained, yet her resolve wavered, articulated through the tightening grip of her fingers as they curled against her sides. "Good," Sylas replied, stepping even closer. "Trust is a dangerous game." As he spoke, her breath caught, a flicker of uncertainty igniting the air between them, tension bubbling to the surface. The space hummed with whispers and unheard confessions, an unspoken acknowledgement of their magnetic pull. At the far corner, the onlookers began to murmur amongst themselves. Toyin's voice broke through the haze. "We need to move soon. The clock is ticking, and I'd prefer not to watch you two dance this waltz while our lives hang by a thread." "You should join us," Sylas quipped, his gaze never wavering from Gwendolyn. "You might learn a thing or two about tension." Distant laughter echoed, a stark contrast to the atmosphere, but it vanished as Gwendolyn turned her full attention back to Sylas, the smile on his face unsettlingly genuine. "That tension is filled with deception, Sylas. Don't mistake it for passion," she warned, the gravity of her voice tinged with a flicker of something deeper, a flicker he found wholly disarming. He hesitated, his heart pounding like a war drum as he reached out, fingertips brushing against her arm. It was a soft touch, exploring, an anchor that drew them together in defiance of the chaos swirling around. "Passion? Maybe we prefer the same flavor of chaos," he countered softly, a whisper against the probing silence, a dance of words shaping the unseen bond forming between them. As the others shifted uneasily, the room thick with energy, Gwendolyn found herself captivated by that shared intensity. They stood on the edge of everything: trust, betrayal, and something neither dared acknowledge. "Maybe," she murmured, feeling her heart accelerate, though she fought to maintain her composure. Sylas leaned closer, their breaths mingling, a tantalizing equilibrium holding them suspended. And just before their lips would meet, her resolve flickered, the hesitation hanging like a drawn breath, leaving the promise of a kiss poised as they succumbed to the swirling maelstrom around them. "We'll see which one of us survives this game, won't we?" And with that, the dance of deception faded into an uncertain silence as the stakes rose higher than either intended. Scene 43, Healing Wounds. The dimly lit room, strewn with remnants of the night's chaos, carried a heavy silence, punctuated only by the soft, steady drip of water from the cracked ceiling. Flickering shadows danced across the tattered walls as Sylas Archer gripped the edge of a rough-hewn table, a frayed map of their uncertain escape sprawled out before him. Despite the pulsating ache that radiated from his side, he couldn't shake the weight of uncertainty crushing his chest. The faint scent of antiseptic mingled with the earthy aroma of damp wood, a reminder of the precarious state they found themselves in. Gwendolyn Frost, her face a canvas of calculated determination, surveyed the map like a general assessing the battlefield, yet beneath her steely exterior lay shadows of doubt. She glanced over her shoulder at Sylas, noticing the sheen of sweat on his brow. "You need to rest," she urged, her voice firm but softened by a hint of concern. "I can't," Sylas replied, wincing as he shifted, a flash of pain igniting in his ribs. The remnants of their latest confrontation still gripped him, the memory sharp and visceral. "We don't have time for that. We need to prepare for the—" "Preparation won't matter if you can't stand," Gwendolyn interrupted, turning fully to face him. Her emerald eyes locked onto his with fierce intensity, masking her own vulnerability beneath layers of bravado. "We're not going to make it through this if you don't take care of yourself first." In that moment, a spark flickered between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared struggles. Her gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, and Sylas felt his resolve waver. The chaos outside felt distant compared to the warmth radiating in this hidden sanctuary so dangerously intimate.